Hi, I'm Thomas. I find myself today in Seaford, Massapequa area. We're going to take a trip here to talk about Mr. Gambino. His story, his former home, and his grave. So please stay tuned and let's begin.
And here we are. We will give you a brief overview of Mr. Carlo Gambino and his life, as well as look at his home, which I discussed in this video. So Mr. Gambino, born in 1902, an Italian-American crime boss of the Gambino crime family. This happened after the Appalachian meeting in 1957. Mr. Gambino, born in Sicily in 1902, to a family that belonged to a Sicilian mafia gang. He had two brothers. His parents were Italian immigrants, Tommaso Gambino and Felice Castellano. Gambino came to the United States in 1921. He joined his cousins, the Castellanos, which is a name I'm sure we're familiar with, in New York City. He had worked for a small trucking firm owned by his uncle's family. Gambino later moved to a modest house located on Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn. His Long Island residence, which is where we're going to, this is modern-day Massapequa. Well, his summer residence, boy, is it a residence in Massapequa. I guess it's and just so you understand modern-day Massapequa, it might have been different back then. Modern-day Massapequa is a lot of, pretty much, people who live in Massapequa. It's not really a beach town per se. You know, when I think of beach town or summer towns, you think of Long Beach, you think of the Hamptons, think of Montauk, out there in Suffolk County, all these little towns. Not so much Massapequa. Pretty much, I could probably even tell you hardly any. Maybe the definition has changed now compared to what it was back then. But the home looks over the South Oyster Bay. In 1932, Gambino married one of his cousins, Catherine Castellano, the sister of Paul Castellano. You're familiar with the name Paul Castellano. Did a video on his home as well, and his grave. Please check back and look at the channel as well. You'll find it there. So it's a beautiful home. We'll get to that home, and you'll see that home as it's there. So briefly, after the death of Mr. Massapequa,
take the next right onto Bay Drive, then turn right onto Sunset Boulevard.
Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing the name. Gambino and his cousins became soldiers in the family headed by Vincent Monegano. Despite being a mob power in his own right, Albert Anastasia was nominally
take the next right onto Sunset Boulevard, then turn left onto Club Drive.
Mangano family. During Mangano's 20-year rule, Mangano had resented Anastasia's close ties to Luciano Costello.
Take the next left onto Club Drive.
Gambino was arrested, as we're continuing on with the story. Keep in mind Anastasia's name. Gambino was arrested in 1937. Served 22 months in prison.
You will arrive at your destination.
That is the only time that he was ever in prison. He served 22 months. So, Manegano now, his brother, Philip, was found dead near Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. He was murdered along with his brother on the orders of Anastasia in Brooklyn, 1951. Vincent Manganiello's body, never found, declared dead 10 years later on October 30th, 1961. No one was ever arrested in the Manganiello.
You've arrived.
Murders, but it was widely assumed Anastasia had disappeared. So you're looking now at the summer home. It's right. We're going to turn right back around. This house is a absolute gorgeous house. Could only imagine the price tag on this home. You're looking at it straight ahead there, right? The house right in front of the black SUV there. Specs of the house, and we're just assuming that this is correct. So the house right now is 6,118 square feet, 0.37 of an acre, 4.5 bathrooms. That was Mr. Gambino's summer residence, as we're dipping out now of the neighborhood. And now you're going to look at the surrounding area here as well. We're going to take you through the rest of the neighborhood, and we're going to then go into Queens, which is where Mr. Gambino is laid to rest in St. John's Cemetery, and we'll show you that in a matter of moments here. But just going on, picking up the story where we remember Mr. Anastasia now. Supposedly murdered Mr. Mangano, who Mr. Gambino is closely associated with. That's the rumor. However, no one ever proved anything. So, in the mid-1950s, another well-known name, Mr. Genovese, decided to move against Frank Costello. However, Mr. Genovese needed to also remove Costello's strong ally on the commission, Albert Anastasia, who was the boss of the Anastasia crime family. Genovese was soon conspiring with Mr. Gambino, Anastasia's underboss, to remove Anastasia. In 1957, Genovese decided to move on to Costello. Genovese ordered Vincent
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto Sunset Boulevard.
Family crime boss Costello, and on May 1957, that's what happened. It was a superficial wound, however, but it
Take the second right onto Sunset Boulevard, then turn left onto Club Drive.
Retire. With Costello gone, Genovese and Gambino allegedly ordered Anastasia's murder. Gambino apparently gave the contract to Joe Profassi, who then allegedly gave it to the Gallo crew. Crazy Joe Gallo, with Anastasia being murdered in 1957 in the barber shop of a Park Sheraton hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Gambino, with this, then became the new boss of the Mangano crime family, which was renamed the Gambino crime family. And the rest, they say, is history. Gambino appointed Joseph Biondo as the underboss. However, by 1965, he was replaced by Emilio Croce, who we will be discussing in a future video as well. As we are in St. John's Cemetery now, you see the grave of Mr. Carlo Gambino, along with his children, his wife. This family room of St. John's Cemetery. You have other members. John Gotti is buried here as well. A lot of crime figures are buried here in St. John's Cemetery. So, in November of 1957, immediately after the Anastasia murder and taking control of the Luciano crime family from Castellano, Genovese wanted to legitimize his new power by holding a national Costa Nostra meeting. So we fast forward, and in Appalachian, New York, there was a meeting. A lot of big names from the organized crime family. They all met there. They were became a well publicized event. A lot of FBI were on the scene trying to gather up as much info as they could, and a lot of them were arrested. They tried to be apprehended because it leaked out. Gambino was thought to have attended the meeting, but not one of the mobsters that were apprehended. He escaped. Genovese over there was captured, and he said that he wanted to discuss business with an individual by the name of Barbara. The police let him go. Gambino and Luciano allegedly helped pay part of $100,000 to a Puerto Rican drug dealer to falsely implicate Genovese in a drug deal. And with that, in 1959, Genovese was sentenced to 15 years in prison for drug offenses. And he died in 1969. So after Genovese, his imprisonment, Gambino subsequently took control of the commission. He despised drugs, and even though heroin and cocaine were highly lucrative, he thought that that would attract attention. The punishment for a family member dealing drugs in the Gambino style was death. In the 1960s, the Gambino family had 500 soldiers and over 1,000 associates. Wow. A man of power. That is a man of power, and there's so much more that we could go on about the Gambino crime family and Carlo Gambino. But that is for another video for another time. Just wanted to give you the basics and show you his former home, show you his, cemetery, the cemetery where he's buried. We're going to be outside of the building, that way you could see it as well in case you do want to visit Mr. Gambino. It's pretty easy to get to. You're not going to run into too much trouble. The cemetery, the mausoleum, is labeled very accordingly, so there's, go and find a grave, actually, and search Carlo Gambino on the St. John Cemetery, and it pops up. It's very easy to find. Here's we're outside the mausoleum. The great, feared Carlo Gambino and the Gambino crime family. Very interesting man with a very interesting story. Hope all is well.